Hello, everyone. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Welcome to the newest episode of the Geek Report. This episode will cover news in the world of movies, TV, anime, and video games for the weeks of December 1st through December 15th, 2025. Now, your host, the Shadow 00 Knight.
Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing good. Hope you all are doing happy, doing blessed, doing safe, doing well, and I'm hoping you're having a great holiday and Christmas season. Welcome to your Geek Report for the weeks of December 1st through December 15th of 2025. We've got a few news items to talk about, so let's get started. So first off, we're going to start off in our movie and TV segment. And first off, we got a new Supergirl trailer. Now, I am still standing by what I said during our Superman review a little while back. That I did not like the way they treated Supergirl. And in this trailer, it doesn't get any better. I didn't like how they treated her in this trailer either. But we're going to take a look at the trailer, and I'm just going to give you some overall thoughts on it. Then we got some huge movie news out of the Game Awards. And that is that we got our first look at the upcoming Street Fighter movie. I'm going to talk about what all I saw, what I thought about it, and overall my general impressions of it. And then we got some anime news that I want to talk about. A couple of years ago, there was an anime that I got into called Saga of Tanya the Evil. And it's been a couple of years since we've gotten to season 2 of that anime. Well, now we are. And they dropped a new trailer and visual for Saga of Tanya the Evil. I'm going to talk about this a little bit and just give you my overall impressions of it. Then we move on into our gaming news segment. And the first bit of news in our gaming news segment comes from the Game Awards. Actually, all of our news comes from the Game Awards. And that is the announcement of Ace Combat 8. Now, Ace Combat is a fighter sim series, okay? It's a series of games that basically have you being a pilot and having a campaign and all that, okay? I've thoroughly enjoyed Ace Combat 7 when it came out a couple of years ago, but now they're announcing Ace Combat 8 Wings of Thief. I'm going to take a look at the trailer and just overall give you my thoughts and opinions on what we're seeing here and what overall I'm thinking about in terms of Ace Combat coming back. Then we got some huge Star Wars video game news. The first bit of news we got, I think is probably the biggest news of the night, is the announcement of what they're calling Fate of the Old Republic. What is said to be a spiritual successor to two of the most popular Star Wars games ever created, the Knights of the Old Republic series. We're going to take a look at this trailer, which ain't very long and doesn't have a whole lot in it. But we're going to take a look at this trailer, and I'm going to give you some of my thoughts and opinions on it. And then we got Star Wars Galactic Racer. You know, it's been quite a while since we've had a Star Wars racer. Not since Star Wars Pod Racing back in the PS1 or PS2 days. Okay? So it's very interesting to see Star Wars return to the racing genre. We're going to take a look at the trailer, and I'm going to give you some of my own thoughts, opinions, and just overall impressions of what we saw. And then I'm going to talk a little about the Game Awards. You know, the Game Awards, we got a lot of announcements out of the Game Awards this year. And some of them I didn't talk about here because I wanted more information before I did. And some of them I did talk about. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Game Awards and just overall what I think the Game Awards tells about where we are in the game industry as a whole. So sit back, relax, grab yourself something to eat, grab yourself something to drink, and let's take a look at the Geek Report for the weeks of December 1st through December 15th of 2025.
Now, let's begin our Geek Report in our TV and movie segment. So, let's see what big news dropped in the past 2 weeks in the world of TV, movies, and anime.
So now let's begin with our movie and TV segment. And I really don't know a whole lot to say about this movie, okay? The reason behind that is because when they showed her in Superman, I absolutely hated the way they did her character. Okay? The first time we saw the character Kal-El or Supergirl was drunk, hungover, coming into the Fortress of Solitude to collect crypto. Okay. Well, now she's getting her own movie, and it ain't any better. Okay? Let me say this. I think I know where James Gunn is going with the reason why she drinks. Okay? I don't think it's just a party. I think it's to dull the pain of her losing Kandor and Krypton. Okay? Here's my issue. Okay? There were better ways to do PTSD, dealing with that trauma other than turning her into a drunk party girl. And that's exactly what they've done to this character. They've deconstructed her and turned her into a drunk party girl. Okay? There were other ways for them to show that the trauma of her losing Krypton, the trauma of losing her people, the trauma of her losing Kandor would be affecting her. Okay? I could handle if they were going to make her into a rebel, if they were going to make her less trusting of people, and all that. But to turn her into some drunk party girl who does nothing all day but lay in her trailer, then go to a bar on a planet with a red sun and get drunk and get into fights. No. Okay? There were better ways to do it. Okay? But I'm going to let you see for yourself. So, this here is the trailer for the upcoming movie, Supergirl. So, my first question is, here in a minute you're going to see that she's staying in this trailer or whatever, alone with Krypto. Okay. Superman left her with her family. What happened to him? I mean, did they get tired of her nonsense and just kick her out? Did she leave on her own? That's my first question.
You managed to get most of it on the paper this time. Good job, buddy.
See, you see what I'm saying? They're making her out to be this drunk party girl who's hungover half the time. Okay? And I kind of get where he's going with this, because later on you're going to see her and you're going to just feel what I'm talking about, where I think she's trying to deal with trauma and she hasn't done it in a healthy way. Okay? But there were better ways of her having PTSD or dealing with the trauma of losing Krypton, of losing Kandor, of losing 90% of her people, except for Superman and Krypto, than for her to become a drunk party girl. Okay? Simple as that. There were other ways to deal with that trauma. There were other ways to show that trauma in Supergirl than to have her become a drunk party girl.
Kal-El. Hereby declare.
Now, in the background, you hear an 80s song. Okay? Now, James Gunn is kind of leading this whole DC universe. And I'm seriously beginning to wonder if this ain't his take on the Supergirl origin, kind of mixed with Star-Lord. Because remember, in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies that he did over at Marvel, this is DC, but over at Marvel he did Guardians of the Galaxy. He introduced Star-Lord with some 80s soundtrack. So I'm kind of wondering if he's kind of doing the same thing here, okay? But the execution is just horrible, alright?
The 23 will be the best year yet. Let's be honest, babe, it's not a very high bar to clear. I didn't know.
Now, this scene right here makes me think that Brainiac will play a part in this movie somehow. Okay. Not a big part, but I do think they're kind of setting him up to kind of be like the Thanos of this DC universe. Okay? Because in some of the comics and even in a couple of the animated movies that DC did, Brainiac would take a city from a world, miniaturize it, and then destroy the world, basically leaving just this city behind. Okay? So I'm kind of wondering if that's what's happening. If we're not seeing what they think is the destruction of Kandor with this, but really it's just Brainiac miniaturizing it and keeping it while he destroys everything else. And I'm kind of wondering if perhaps they ain't setting up Brainiac to be kind of like the Thanos of this DC universe. Okay?
I believe he was still alive. What was it like to lose everything in a day?
Proton didn't die in a day. The gods are not that kind. Okay, this does not look like this is gonna end well. For you guys.
Do others on your planet have powers like you?
No, it's a pretty small group of 2.
That right there, that kind of tells me that Crypto is either going to be hurt or he's going to be killed. I don't think he would be killed off, unless it was just for shock value, because Crypto was one of the best things about the Superman movie. And I think they'll probably try to keep that going with the Supergirl movie. And plus, Crypto is perfect for, like, toys and stuff. Okay? So I don't think they would kill him off, but I do think he would get seriously hurt. Now, this right here is supposed to be Lobo. Okay? Lobo is a main fixture in comic book movies. He's like a bounty hunter and all that. I don't know a whole lot about Lobo, except he's being played by Jason Momoa, who used to play Aquaman. Okay? So, it's kind of grainy. Don't get a real good look at him. But this is supposed to be Lobo, and I'm figuring that he's probably going to be the big bad of this movie. Alright? I don't think they would bring Brainiac on until they get the team-up movie. Until they get all the members of the Justice League together. But I think for this movie, he's going to be the big bad. Okay?
What Superman meant.
He sees the good in everyone. And I see the truth.
Now see, that right there I could have handled. If they had just made it out where she did not trust people, where she had a cynical view of people because of her life experiences, I could have handled that. I literally could have handled that, okay? Instead, what did they do? They go and they make her into a drunk party girl who hates everyone, okay? That's really what gets me, is they've turned her into this drunk party girl and have given her this redemption arc. When really they didn't need to do that. And honestly, I think James Gunn is trying to take Star-Lord's origin story and put it on Supergirl. That's my view right now. And there we got the date, June 26, 2026. I have no hype for this movie, okay? And I've actually loved other iterations of Supergirl, okay? The CW's version of Supergirl was better than this, okay? But I have no hype for this at all. None whatsoever. Because I don't like the fact that they've turned her into a drunk party girl, when there was better ways to show that she was trying to handle this trauma of losing her home world, where by all accounts they forced a redemption story on this heroine. Okay, I'm pretty sure the actress who plays her is probably a pretty decent actress, okay, but they've given her a crap script. By all accounts, what James Gunn has done and has allowed to do is basically put Star-Lord's origin story onto Supergirl. That's basically what he's done. Okay? You've got the guy who doesn't care turned into the girl who doesn't care. You've got the alcohol. You've got the 80s soundtrack. He's basically taken Star-Lord's origin story and put it on Supergirl. That's basically what he's done. Okay? I'm very disappointed. And I think after this, I think this will flop. Okay? I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping there's going to be another trailer that's going to be a better done trailer. I think this is going to flop. Okay? And after this and Superman, I think that they really need to reevaluate what they're going to do with DC. Okay? I really do think that. Alright? Because if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first couple of movies out of the gate, whether you're talking about Iron Man, Thor, or Captain America, were bangers. They hit all the spots. They didn't try to change anything. They were familiar. And then you look at the DC Universe. They're changing Superman's origin story. They're turning Supergirl into basically a drunk who's trying to overcome trauma with alcohol. I'm sorry. Okay? I'm not in this. I'm not down for this. I don't like this. I have no hype for this whatsoever. And I think they're ruining a good opportunity. Okay? They're ruining a great opportunity for what could be a great hero, a great heroine. Instead, what are they doing? They're turning her into a drunk party girl and forcing a redemption arc down her throat. That's just my opinion.
Continuing on with the news from TV, movies, and anime from the past 2 weeks.
So on December 11th, the Game Awards happened. And we had a lot of reveals. But I think one of the biggest was the upcoming movie, Street Fighter. Now, this is based off the video game franchise. And there has been another Street Fighter movie before this. It starred Jean-Claude Van Damme. But this is completely different. Okay? I saw the trailer during the Game Awards, and it looked like they were actually doing something smart and having fun with the property. Okay? So let's take a look at the trailer, and I'll give you some of my own thoughts and opinions on it. But this here is the trailer for the upcoming movie, Street Fighter. So already we're seeing some looks. We're seeing Zangief, we saw Chun-Li. So we're already seeing some familiar faces we know from the games. I'm assuming that 50 Cent is going to be playing as Balrog. Now, this is really our first look at Cody Rhodes playing as Guile. Okay? This looks intense. And it looks like they're having fun with the franchise. That they're not trying to go the serious route of Mortal Kombat, but they're trying to have fun with this franchise and doing all these Easter eggs for all the old school gamers who not only played it on the consoles, but played it in the arcades back in the day. Okay? Right there, that scene right there is really important. If you never played Street Fighter back in the day, okay, if you have never played Street Fighter back in the arcades, the original Street Fighter had a bonus level where your fighter would have to destroy a car in under a minute. Okay? And having that on here not only talks to the fans of the console versions who have played it, like those who have done the remakes and stuff, but it speaks to people like me who played it back in the arcades during the 80s and 90s. Okay? That brings back so many nostalgic memories. Okay? I absolutely love that they added this, and it tells me that they're having fun with the franchise, and it's made by people, at least from this trailer, that it's being made by people who actually love this franchise and know this franchise, not people who just want to make a quick buck. Okay? But that was the trailer that we got during the Game Awards for Street Fighter. Based off this trailer alone, I'm sold. Okay, now maybe the next trailer will be god awful and we'll get more of a story element. But based off what I saw here, I'm in. I'm in. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Okay, I thought they did a really good job with it. You know, I thought they did a great job with this trailer. Okay, and if the trailer is any indication of what the movie is going to be like, then heck yeah. I'm sold, okay? Just as long as they don't let Hollywood put any of their nonsense into it, you know? Because whenever you get, like, hyped for a trailer like this, there's always that worry in the back of my mind, okay, how are they going to make it woke? You know what I'm saying? What are they going to do? Are they going to change this character? Are they going to change that character? I really hope they just keep it a simple action martial arts movie. That's all I'm asking for. Don't put any political nonsense in it. Don't make any commentary. Just make it a simple movie that speaks to those who played the game on consoles and those who have played the game on the arcade. Okay, that's all I'm asking for. But based on this trailer, that's exactly what they're doing. And I cannot be more happier for it. And I can't wait to see it in theaters.
Continuing on with the news from TV, movies, and anime from the past 2 weeks.
So it's been quite a while since there was any anime news I wanted to talk about. But these past 2 weeks we got some. So a long time ago, I think around 10 years ago, there was an anime series called Saga of Tanya the Evil. And basically the story revolved around a office worker, and he was one of those type of office workers who fired everyone, who only cared about getting higher up in the company and all that. Well, he was killed, and he was reborn in a world that kind of mixed World War I with magic. And it was titled Saga of Tanya the Evil. Now, I absolutely loved this anime. I thought it was a really well done anime. They made Tanya, the main person of this anime, out to be just like all those evil office workers we all know. Someone who does not care about this or that, who only cares about getting higher up in the company, even if it means firing people. Okay? Well, now they're coming out with season 2 of it. Alright. And while it's been over 10 years since we got a season 2 of this anime, I'm really interested to see this because I saw the first season and it was a really good anime. I saw the movie and it kind of set Tanya up with finally a quote-unquote villain who could counter her, okay? Someone who had her strength, who had her powers, who could truly be her equal. And I'm kind of wondering how she's going to play in this. So let's check out the trailer for the Saga of Tanya the Evil Season 2. And I'll just give you some of my thoughts and opinions on it. So, at this point in the anime, it's obvious that the Empire has won. Okay? That instead of the German Empire losing World War I, they have actually accomplished their task and have beaten World War I. Okay? In this anime. Alright? So, at this point, it's quite obvious that they have won. They've beaten back France. They've beaten back Poland. All of them. Okay?
北で陸海共同敵を撃滅。南にきらめく逆襲の刃が敵を撃つ。西で夕焼け我にうがてぬ敵陣なし。東の脅威我らこれらも撃砕せる。帝国万歳。明日も勝つ。
嘘を言うな。昨日は勝った、今日も勝った、明日も勝つ。バカバカしい。戦略なき作戦、活用なき勝利、これでは全てが浪費だ。出口を探せバカ野郎。ああ失礼、ターニャ・フォン・デグレチョフ中佐であります。出口はいずこにありや。全世界は知らんと欲す。幼女戦記セカンドシーズン2002。
Alright, I know it was in a foreign language. That was the only trailer they've dropped so far, but it's coming in 2026. At the end of season 1, okay, we got a situation where Tanya was trying to tell her commanding officer, hey, do not let this army escape or else they will come back and fight us. Do not let them escape. And in the end, they wouldn't listen to her. And I think in season 2, we're going to see the results of that. I think in season 2, we're going to see that choice to let that army escape is going to be the downfall of the Empire. Okay. But that's the trailer we got. That's the first visual we got of season 2 of Saga of Tanya the Evil. This is a really good anime, and if you haven't seen season 1 yet, I suggest you do, because it kind of mixes World War I with magic. Okay, it kind of mixes that. You've got, on one hand, trench warfare, but then on the other hand, you got magicians and mages shooting magic from their rifles. Okay, it's really a good anime. I really did enjoy it, and I honestly can't wait for season 2. I really cannot wait for season 2. 2026, I think, is going to be a big year for anime. Because if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken on this point, not only do we have the Saga of Tanya the Evil Season 2 happening, we also have the return of Black Clover. Okay? So, I'm honestly pretty stoked about 2026 in terms of anime. But yeah, Saga Tanya the Evil 2026, it's coming on. I'm going to try and watch it, check it out. Before that, though, I would definitely suggest you rewatch season 1, because it has been a while since season 1 has been on the air. But yeah, definitely check it out if you can, if you like those type of anime. But it is a really cool anime with a really cool concept.
Now moving on, let's move on to this episode's video game segment. So, let's see what news dropped in the past 2 weeks in the world of video games.
So, a while back, I played a game called Ace Combat 7. And it was a basically part flight simulator and part airplane action game, okay? Where basically you flew different types of planes and you took on missions in this world, okay? And I thoroughly enjoyed it, okay? It was quite possibly one of my favorite flight simulator games I've played, okay? I mean, it had the right amount of realism, but also the good gameplay to go with it, okay? I thoroughly enjoyed Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown, okay? So, last night at the Game Awards, which I will talk about later on, I was thoroughly surprised to see that Ace Combat 8 is coming. Now, they're calling this Wings of Thief. Ace Combat 8 Wings of Thief. And I know Ace Combat has its own storyline, okay? And there's a lot I don't know about the storyline of Ace Combat, okay? But from what I saw of this trailer, it was pretty exciting, okay? It was pretty dope from what I saw of this trailer, Okay, so let's take a look at this trailer, and I will give you some of my own thoughts and opinions on what we're seeing here. But this here is the trailer for the upcoming game, Ace Combat 8 Wings of Thief. So the first thing is, this is Ace Combat's 30th year of being a game. 30 years. Imagine that. From 1 to 8, it's 30 years. Okay?
Take a look. What a sight to behold. Whew, it's all over. The last lands of the FCU, the Federation of Central Usia.
First of all, thank you for joining us on this ship.
Hello there, my dear newcomer. You are very lucky, you know.
Yes, we are critically undermanned on this ship.
Don't worry at all. The man in front is Jan Rex Cope.
So, I'm already seeing an FA Hornet that could be a Super Hornet, but it looks like an FA-18 Super Hornet, okay? I could be wrong about that because you have the Hornet and you have the Super Hornet, okay? But from what I'm seeing here, Ace Combat is going to continue what past games have done and not just have the more modern jets like maybe the F-35, the F-22, and so forth, but they're going to have older jets like the F-18 Hornet or maybe the F-15 Tomcat. You know, they're going to go a long way to showing different types of jets. Now, the majority of jets in Ace Combat are modern, okay? But from the Ace Combat 7 game that I played, they ranged from the Vietnam War all the way up to today, and even some experimental stuff. So, yeah, I think they're still going to go with that whole theme of having just a wide range of jets.
The Wings of Thief. You're riding shotgun with the legendary Ace of Aces.
He's a mass delusion fabricated by the rumor mill.
Now, that right there throws back memories. Because there was a machine in Ace Combat 7 that was very much like that. That looked almost exactly like that. In fact, it was the boss of the final level. It was one of the bosses of the final level. Okay? And what they call that a flying wing in the aeronautical areas. But yeah, that was one of the bosses of the final level. So I'm kind of wondering if this ain't picking up right where Ace Combat 7 kind of left off. Okay, I'm kind of wondering that. But like I said before, I'm not very familiar with the storyline of Ace Combat. Okay, I just know that there's different countries and you basically played as a guy who was fighting for his homeland in Ace Combat 7. What Ace Combat 8's story is, I have no earthly idea. But after seeing that, it makes me believe that they are going to continue on from Ace Combat 7.
The rumor mill of social media.
Radar contact. We think it's the shadows.
Our lone target is Wings.
All dogs fire.
Time to pull out. 22.
Roger that.
God damn it. Start swimming, soldier. Make it home alive.
Let's keep at it, Rex.
Ray, heads up!
On your orders, Rex.
To keep Hope alive, Wings of Thief must stay on the mission. Must fly on.
I can make up your kill count to be whatever. Right. From now on, you'll be the greatest ace pilot this war will ever know.
And there you see, it's coming in 2026. Let me say, what I saw from this got me really excited for it. And it's just another reason to get a PS5. Now, does this make me want to jump out and get a PS5? No, it doesn't. I'm still looking for that hardcore killer application that makes me want to spend $700, $800 on a console. And I have not seen it yet. Okay? I mean, there are some great games on here, but where's that game that pulls me? Okay? That pulls me in. Ace Combat 8 is looks like to be a great game. Okay? And it's following in the footsteps of Ace Combat 7. You know, having all these jets. Not only the current jets, but also maybe some from the past. Okay? And I wouldn't be surprised to see some experimental jets. To be completely honest, I would not be surprised if the newest Air Force fighter they announced, the F-47, would be in on here. Okay? I would not be surprised in the least bit. And I think it would be really cool if they did do that. But I'm not sitting here saying they are, but I would not be surprised if they did. Okay? But from what I saw of this trailer, it's got me kind of hyped for it. Because I absolutely loved Ace Combat 7. I want to play Ace Combat 8. But it's not a strong enough reason to go out and spend $700-800 on a PlayStation 5 console. Okay? It just ain't. And that's really what's really hurting me right now is the fact that I still play games on PS4. I love my PS4. My PS4 has been through hell and back. Okay? But for all intents and purposes, I need to upgrade soon. I know that. Because 90% of the games that were announced at the Game Awards that have been announced for next year are PS5 only. They're not going to PS4. But back to this. This looks like to be a great game. It looked to be really cool. It looked to be following in the steps of Ace Combat 7, having this great story filled with all these fighters. I would not be surprised to see fighters all the way from Vietnam to today, and maybe even some experimental ones like the F-47 that was just announced a little while back. If they keep up with that, if they can give us a great campaign, a great story, and maybe even a great multiplayer, oh yeah, I would definitely get this if I had PS5. No doubt.
Let's continue taking a look at the news from the world of video games from the past 2 weeks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this next story really came out of left field. I mean, this story was a surprise. When I first saw the trailer at the Game Awards, I honestly and truly thought that this was a trailer for the long-rumored Star Wars Eclipse. Okay, I thought, okay, we're finally getting a release date for Eclipse, which is said to be taking place in the New Republic. Okay. But this Star Wars game is not that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going back to the Old Republic. We are going back to the legendary Old Republic that had Revan, that had Knights of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic 2. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the first trailer to Fate of the Old Republic. Now, I've heard this described as two things. I've heard this first described as a spiritual successor to Knights of the Old Republic 2. And I've also heard it being described as a direct sequel to Knights of the Old Republic. Okay? So, I don't know which to think about this at this point. Now, there ain't a whole lot here in terms of gameplay. But the cinematic alone has got me hyped because the Old Republic is one of those time frames that since Disney kind of took over, hasn't really talked about. Okay? And we all know the state Star Wars is in right now. It's not a very good state. Out of the books, the comics, and the movies and the TV shows, the games are what keeping Star Wars alive. I mean, you've got games like Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor. You had Squadrons a while back. The games are keeping Star Wars alive. Okay, really. And I hope they continue to do it with Fate of the Old Republic. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the first trailer for the upcoming Star Wars game, Fate of the Old Republic. Like I said, there isn't a whole lot here, okay? But I am curious what planets they're going to. Because this does not look like Hoth, okay? This really does not look like Hoth. Because there's too much water and land. So I am very curious to know what planet they're going to. All right. Down there at the bottom, you can see the three individuals walking towards something. Okay. If you look to the right, that looks an awfully lot like a K2SO droid that we saw in Rogue One. Okay. Now, I can't sit here and say that's exactly what it is, but it looks very much like it. The middle character, I'm assuming is going to be a Jedi. The character to the left, I don't know. I mean, he looks an awful lot like a trooper of the Old Republic. But he could also be Mandalorian. But that would not kind of sit right with the lore they've established. But that's another question. Where is this going to take place in the lore in terms of how it's going to connect to the prequel trilogy, to the original trilogy, to even the sequel trilogy and to the TV shows? Okay, how is it going to connect to the movies and TV of Star Wars in general versus just being connected to the games? Okay. And there you had Fate of the Old Republic. First off, this is being made by Casey Hudson. He was behind Knights of the Old Republic. So that's giving me a lot of hope already. Okay. Here's my problem. Is that this is Star Wars we're talking about. And I'm very concerned that the Old Republic is such a beloved timeline that someone at Lucasfilm is going to start trying to push their nonsense into it. Their political correctness, their wokeness, or whatever you want to call it. I don't want them to do that. I want them to leave it alone. Okay? Leave the Old Republic alone. Okay? Your nonsense has not worked in the movies, has not worked in the TV shows. Why would you go and do that in the gaming verse? And that's what worries me already. Is that anytime something has Star Wars attached to it, I'm always worried that they're going to go out and they're going to put their political nonsense into it. Okay? Secondly, Knights of the Old Republic and the Old Republic MMORPG were RPGs. You create your character, you give them certain attributes and all that. And there's choices to be made along the way of the journey, where each playthrough feels like a journey in on itself, where you don't have to be completely light or completely dark. I'm kind of wondering if they're going to go that route here. I'm hoping that they do. I'm hoping that you can create your own character, that you can create your own character from a number of species, where it don't have to just be humans. It could be any alien from the Star Wars games. Okay? So I'm hoping they go that route, that they keep that into it, and not force you into a single character, but let you choose your character. Okay? I think that if they do this right, okay, if they can do this successfully and not let Star Wars, Lucasfilm, whoever, put their grubby mitts on it and start saying, oh, you gotta add this, oh, you gotta add that, you know, blah, 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 then I think this could be a great game. Okay? And could quite possibly reignite some of the love we have for Star Wars instead of all the drama. Okay? We've already seen some great Star Wars games where you're talking about Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, Star Wars Squadrons. We've already seen some great Star Wars games, but we have also seen some bad ones. Okay? I'm hoping this is going to be some of the great ones. That it's going to follow in the steps of Knights of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic 2. Tell a great story, be an RPG where you can make your own character, and something that the people over at Lucasfilm who want to put political correctness into everything will just leave alone. Okay? I really hope that's what happens here. Okay? And the fact that it is coming out in 2026 does kind of give me concern. Because if they are coming out in 2026, if they are going to come out in 2026 with this, which there is no release date announced for this, but if they're showing a trailer now, it makes me wonder if they are going to come out in 2026 with this. Which is very concerning because if they come out in the fall of 2026, that means they'll be going up against Grand Theft Auto 6. And I don't want that. Because Grand Theft Auto 6 is literally going to be the juggernaut next year. So I am kind of hoping they do take their time with this and maybe push this back to 2027. If they did that, where they pushed it back to maybe early to mid 2027, I would be happy. Because Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be a juggernaut next year. A juggernaut that everyone is going to want to avoid. But this was the first official trailer for Fate of the Old Republic. Based on what I saw, I can't wait for this. We didn't get a whole lot from this, and I'm hoping in the next trailer we get more. Like actual gameplay, maybe some reveals of the RPG elements, create character, that sort of thing. But yeah, I absolutely love the trailer. It gave you just enough to tease you and enough to whet your appetite for more. And I can't wait until we get more.
Let's continue taking a look at the news from the world of video games from the past 2 weeks.
Now then, before I start talking about the Game Awards, okay, I want to talk about one more announcement that they made at the Game Awards. And that announcement is for Star Wars Galactic Racer. We've not had a Star Wars racing game since Star Wars Pod Racer back in the PS1 or PS2. Okay? So it's been quite a while. And a racing game is one of the games where I just don't think they're going to be able to put the political nonsense into it. Okay? And I really hope I'm right about that. That they don't put their political nonsense into this. Okay? Any other game type, whether it be action, adventure, campaign, multiplayer, whether it be RPG, whatever, I'm a little apprehensive about them putting their political nonsense into it. Because anytime I see Star Wars, I'm always worried that they're going to make it woke. Okay? But this is a racing game. Okay? I mean, it's simple. You race around a track, you gain points, you win. Okay? I mean, there's no way for them to mess this up. Okay? So let's check out Galactic Racer. And throughout the trailer, I'll give you some of my thoughts and opinions on it.
I want it back.
Alright, this right here is already telling me that we're kind of in the sequel era. I would not say we're completely in the sequel era, but I would say that this is post-original trilogy. So I would definitely say that this is post-Return to Jedi. Quite possibly just before the sequel movies began. I would even bet that this is probably taking place in the Mandalorian timeline. Okay? Which is 10 years after Return of the Jedi. So, that's where I'm thinking this is taking place at.
The way it was before the Empire shut it down. Massive engines. Lightning fast. Lives on the line. The pilots were incredible. Best of the best.
Okay, so right there, we're seeing that the Empire has shut down pod racing. Okay? That the Empire shut it down. So, I'm guessing that the story of this is that they were somehow able to bring it back after the Empire fell.
United by one beautiful dream.
She needs racing!
Now, so far, I've not seen what looks like any creatures. Alright, so let me go back through that and see if there's any, like, creatures or anything like that.
Racing!
Now, hold on a minute. I recognize that creature right there. So, right here, that looks like a Gungan. If you don't remember, a Gungan was the aliens on Naboo in the very first episode of Star Wars, The Phantom Menace. Okay, so that looks like a Gungan right there. Now, something else I just noticed is that this scene right here, and I'm going to replay it back, looks almost like Hoth. Okay, that looks almost like Hoth. So we are going to be going to some familiar places. So I would not be surprised if we went not just to Hoth, but maybe Jakku, Tatooine, Naboo. I mean, if they have a Gungan in there, we obviously are going to be going to Naboo. So I think we're definitely going to be going to different planets. Okay. To be quite honest, this feels like they're kind of combining Star Wars with Mario Kart Racer. Except you don't have like the turtle shells and stuff. And I'm kind of wondering about that. Are there going to be weapons in this? You know, are there going to be like power-ups and that sort of thing? And that was Galactic Racer, the newest Star Wars racing game. So the only release date I could find was for 2026. So it's coming out sometime in 2026. Normally I would be worried that someone at Lucasfilm would be trying to put their political nonsense into this. But I'm not worried about this game because of the simple fact that it is a racing game. And there's really no way for you to put your political nonsense into a racing game. And I don't think they would. Okay, I really don't think they would. You know, with Fate of the Old Republic, I could see them doing it. But at the same time, I can't. Because they don't want to mess up the gaming division of Star Wars. Because everything else has messed up with Star Wars. Okay? The one thing that has been keeping the fans together has been the games. Okay, so I doubt they're going to touch Galactic Racer because you really can't put political nonsense into a racing game unless you try really hard. Okay, and if they did that, that would definitely mess up the gaming division of Star Wars. But this is Galactic Racer. It's the first racing game I believe we've had since Pod Racing, Star Wars Pod Racer, back in the PS1, PS2 era. It looks pretty interesting. I'm kind of wondering about any power-ups you can include. I'm wondering if all those explosions we saw was not just them hitting the sides of rocks and stuff, but because of power-ups or abilities or whatnot. It's definitely obvious that you're going to be able to go with different creatures from the Star Wars universe, like Gungans and whatnot. I'm not expecting RPG-like creator character, but I am expecting you to be able to choose your pilot and choose your pod racing and everything. And based on what I saw in this trailer, I think the story is probably going to revolve around them bringing back pod racing after it was shut down by the Empire. And when the Empire fell at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Republic allowed them to do pod racing again. Okay? So that's where I'm going with this so far in terms of a story. But it looks pretty interesting. I have to say it looks pretty good. Is it something I would get? I don't know yet. I have to see another trailer. Because I want to know more about the story and maybe about the power-ups that would be included. and the pods themselves, the racing machines themselves, and what aliens are going to be available. But it has got me interested to see more of this game, and perhaps, look more into it.
Let's continue taking a look at the news from the world of video games from the past 2 weeks.
So, these past 2 weeks, on December the 11th, the Game Awards happened. And I'm not going to really talk a long time about the Game Awards. But in this episode of the Geek Report, a lot of the announcements that I talked about were made at the Game Awards or just before. Okay? And there were announcements that were made that I didn't really talk about. One of them being the new Tomb Raider game, as well as a remake of the original Tomb Raider game. Okay? But let me say that there really wasn't any big surprises at the Game Awards this year. I mean, Claire Obscura Expedition 30 ran away with the Game Awards this year. I think they won all but one of the awards they were nominated for. But what's really interesting about this year's Game Awards was it wasn't the big name titles that won the majority of the awards. For example, Claire Obscura Expedition 33 is an indie game, okay, from an independent studio. And I think that this year's Game Awards, with the fact that games like Hades were winning big, and games like Battlefield 6 were not, games like Ghost of Yotei were not, really does say that AAA gaming from big studios like Ubisoft, like Activision and Microsoft, like EA, is kind of in a bad spot. And maybe they're getting kind of in a situation where they're kind of resting on their laurels, while independent studios have a lot more freedom to make what they want, how they want. And they're kind of showing up the big dogs. And I think this year was a perfect example of that, where independent studios were basically going to places that the big name studios couldn't because of funding or for one reason or another. And I think it's really interesting to see what's going to happen next year. Is that trend going to continue? Or are AAA studios going to be kind of let off the leash and say, okay, make us a great game. We don't care what the story or how you do it. Just make us a great game that makes us money. I think that was really the message this year at this year's Game Awards. That indie developers, for the first time, and I think in a long time, really showed up the big dogs of the gaming industry and made a lot of people in the gaming industry take stock and take notice of what a dedicated team who loves the game they're making, who believes in the game they're making, can do when they're just given the time and resources to do it. I think that was really the big takeaway from this year's Game Awards. Well, everyone, that was your Geek Report for the weeks of December 1st through December 15th of 2025. To kind of review what we talked about, we first started off in our TV and movie news segment, and we talked about the Supergirl trailer. You know, I didn't like Supergirl when she premiered on the Superman movie. I didn't like the way they portrayed her, and this trailer doesn't change things. So I showed you the trailer and just gave you some of my overall impressions of it. Then we got a huge surprise these past 2 weeks in that we got a first look at the Street Fighter trailer. I talked about what all I saw in it and whether or not this is going to be a good adaptation of the classic video game series. And then, to finally close out our movie and TV segment, we talked about an anime that hasn't been out for quite a while, but that's getting a season 2, and that is Saga of Tanya the Evil. I showed you the trailer, I showed you the visual, and overall, I gave you my impressions of this anime and whether or not I'm going to be watching it this past year. So then we moved on into our gaming news segment, and the first big piece of news we got this past week was the announcement of Ace Combat 8, the fighter sim that has become popular over on console. I talked about the trailer, gave you some of my thoughts and impressions of it, and basically whether or not this is getting me excited, because I absolutely loved Ace Combat 7 and how this is going to connect to that. So I basically talked about that as well. And then we got two huge announcements at the Game Awards this year. And the first one is a cinematic trailer for Fate of the Old Republic. I talked about what I thought of this and some of my fears concerning a new Star Wars game set in the timeline of Knights of the Old Republic. Then we got a Star Wars racing game. And it's been a while since we've had a racing game. But I talked about overall what I thought of the trailer for Star Wars Galactic Racer. And also just basically talked about my feelings in general about a new Star Wars racing game coming out. And then I basically talked about the Game Awards. I talked about what the Game Awards said about this year in gaming and what could possibly happen in the future. I hope you guys are doing good. I hope you guys are staying safe, staying well, and staying happy. Check out my other videos as well as my social media. And I will see you guys in the next video and in the next stream. Merry Christmas.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Geek Report. I hope you enjoyed it. If you got a moment, please check out my other video sites as well as my social media and give them a like and follow. I will see you all in the next video and the next stream. Laters.